I think some of the biggest challenges that we have is cost of energy,
Mm-hmm.
and you can really increase like efficiency and economic impact and like even computing when you get into AI. Those are so energy intensive processes that if we can lower the cost of energy and not depend on finite resources.
Welcome to The Bomb, Engineering a Path Forward. I'm your host, Magenta Strongheart. As you know, incubators, fab labs, and makerspaces are near and dear to our hearts here at Design Lab. We're always excited to learn about different spaces supporting innovators at all levels. Today, we're sitting down with co-founder Bill Fienup to talk about what sets mHub apart. Bill is no stranger of the challenges that hard tech prototyping brings. Constraints like budget, material, and expertise can easily turn what seems like a perfect solution into a pipe dream. Bill will tell us about how mHub helps startups build a solid foundation by not only providing access to incredible facilities, but funding and mentorship opportunities as well. This is my conversation with Bill Fienup, and this is The Bomb. We live in a time where design and technology touch every aspect of our lives. But where did it all come from? Who designed it? How is it built and brought to market? What will it look like in a year, 2 years, 100 years? From the phones and smartwatches that help us in our day-to-day to the cutting-edge spaceships and 3D printers that are leading us into the future, modern design is constantly shaping the way we work, communicate, problem solve, and play. And every new design, big or small, starts with an idea and a bill of materials. I'm Magenta Strongheart, and this is The Bomb, where we talk to leading innovators in the tech world and celebrate the transformational power of design. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on The Bomb today, Bill. We're really excited to learn more about mHub. Thank you for also hosting us here. It's a beautiful space. Can't wait to learn more of kind of the evolution of the space. And we just talked with Jacob, who you were telling me was one of the original members of one of the earlier spaces. So maybe we can kind of start there. What was the journey into getting mHub off the ground?
Sure. Well, first, thank you for having me on the podcast. I'm honored to be here. The journey, I think it begins, really in part of the needs and struggles that I had as an entrepreneur trying to build and manufacture physical products. And it gets a little bit into my background. I graduated from MIT. I moved to Chicago to work for IDEO. It's a product development firm, and did product development consulting for about 7 years and got the itch to become an entrepreneur. And, I quit my job and I took the plunge, and it was a big struggle to really create a product without the tools and the resources that I had at these consulting firms or in college. And I had a couple startups that failed, and I noticed others were having similar struggles. And so I wanted to create an ecosystem, a hyper-resource ecosystem where you have the tools, really the resources, the connections, the people, the manufacturers, the equipment, and the capital to develop hard tech products and get them manufactured and commercialized. So that journey really started as a group, a collective. It was a club that we had called Maker Biz. And there were about 300 individuals that, were makers, but they wanted to build a business. It wasn't just about, it wasn't just a hobby of creating something and selling it. It was more about creating a sustainable business that was profitable. Mm-hmm. And
were these startups, sorry to interrupt, but were these startups or also small businesses? Like it might have been a mix.
I think it was a mix. There were people that were dabbling, like, do I want to become an entrepreneur? Mm-hmm. They, we had a meetup group that met once a month. We would rotate, all throughout Chicago. We go to universities, different, companies would host us. Some had a product. Others were still like, they had an idea, and so we were thinking about trying to understand that journey of what is it like to build a hard tech product. And we would meet up, and there was probably about 40 or so people that would come every month, and then there was like a forum group that would exchange ideas and supplier networks and just be a sounding board to help support the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And this was right around when 1871 was starting, and that was like a huge, inspiration in terms of entrepreneurship here in Chicago. Mm-hmm. And their focus is on, software and SaaS. And, I thought there was a need for support around physical products. Hardware, and the manufactured community. And so, I went back to that group and I was like, well, hey, look, what if we had a physical space where we could share prototyping tools and equipment and, work together and share tools to build, our businesses. And so we launched a prototype, like any business, you build a prototype, you see if there's product market fit, you understand who your customers are, what their needs are, how you can serve them. And, I was trying to, take the hypothesis of like, this is the struggles that I had in my entrepreneurial journeys and vet those ideas and see if they really provide value.
You covered a lot of ground there, and you talked about kind of a lot of these different pieces, from the support, the physical space, I think kind of the community, right, and the mentors and kind of the expertise you might learn from one another being in the space together and from this original kind of meetup group and that sort of thing, to the tools and that you lose access to maybe when you leave school, or if you're not working with a big company that has prototyping lab or something like that. And then to the funding, of course, and the financial support, the investment. And so how did you kind of grow? Like, what was the initial set of tools? I think is really interesting to our audience too, because they might have little spaces at home that they're using now, or they have their workbench, but then eventually they might be starting their company and figuring out what's first for your prototyping lab. And obviously depends on the product, but where did you guys start from? And now you have a crazy huge space and list of tools. So what are some of the top tools you have in your space now too?
I think this is where I started in my head as well, as like, what tools do entrepreneurs need? And I'll definitely get into that question. But what I've seen is like the value of a community is really about the people and the skill sets and the knowledge. Having someone who knows how to use that tool, or having someone who knows how to like identify.
Not just the tool sitting there if you can't use it because you don't know how.
And so, the tools are really what bring people to mHub. I think it's the community that retains those people. And I think it's our mentorship and education that makes those businesses successful. But to dive in, like the tool, like I get so excited when we're looking at new tools to purchase, or, when someone comes to us in a partnership looking to give us a tool. But I think, the evolution of tools has also changed. So there's a lot in rapid prototyping. Like we focus a lot in product development and then use manufacturers to scale. So a lot of the work we do is on the development side. And so we're, 3D printers, laser cutters, CNC equipment. Those are the main set of tools that entrepreneurs use here every day. The wood shop also gets a lot of use. But, I would say a lot of people are developing products, in the digital means right now. They're using CAD.
Simulation tools. And have you seen that evolve a lot in the last few years, I would say, as far as simulation tools? I think they've really gotten better and better, obviously, as years go by. But
they've gotten a lot better, and they're much more affordable. A lot of them provide monthly, like a monthly subscription model.
Right.
And I think that has lowered the barriers quite a bit, because before, you'd have to pay thousands of dollars for a license to one of these CAD programs, and now you can pay a monthly fee.
Right.
We offer a lot of CAD software here, and that's to start in the design phase. So that's a tool that's useful for the development, and then you can do analysis on that. And then when you get into the physical, you're 3D printing that, or you're laser cutting those files, or you're machining, blocks of aluminum or steel, in our machining centers. We also have tools, for the wood shop. You don't necessarily need CAD to get in there. We also have a welding lab, a hot metals lab where
I'm super jealous of the hot metals
TIG,
lab,
MIG, plasma
One day
cutting.
I'll try to justify it for design lab, but we can't quite yet.
I mean, I think a MIG welder would go a long way. That's like a very basic welder, but then you get into the more complex like TIG welding. And so, we have all those tools, and then we have an electronics lab and a testing lab. And I think that's where we're investing a lot more as companies get further along and they're manufacturing. They need to inspect those parts, make sure they meet the tolerance and specifications that the part is designed.
Yeah, when you have something ready to test, which is a little further away from the napkin sketch. And so incredible range of tools. And like you said, I'm sure that's a big, thing that draws people to the space. Could you give us, just to give the audience an idea of the kinds of members you have and projects they're working on. I know there's a ton of stuff you guys are supporting, so this is hard probably to do, but if you could pick like 3 products or projects that folks are working on that kind of demonstrate the range of
Sure.
like even from scale where it's like maybe a consumer product all the way up to some sort of industrial level manufacturing tool or something like that, but also as far as like industry or vertical that people are working within. I know you guys have a med tech program. You're focused on environmental kind of sustainability solutions as well, and I'm sure a million other things. So tell us a little bit more about that.
I think our big swim lanes are definitely med tech. About 25% of the companies here are in that industry. Definitely climate and energy, smart, sustainable manufacturing. And those are all the kind of the themes that our accelerator programs are based off of. And in those programs, we actually give capital to companies that, and put them through a 6-month really intensive program. So those themes are mostly made up of like what our base membership is, what industries they are in. And so we do have a lot of, med tech products here. One, I'll give an example, is Wave Therapeutics. So the problem that they're solving is ulcers and bed sores. So if you're sitting in a wheelchair or you're in a hospital bed for a long time, you get this pressure sore that builds up because your body's not moving and you don't have blood circulation. And they've developed a cushion that basically moves those pressure points and increases circulation with a wave motion that pushes the blood back. They've gone through the development. They're in that commercialization stage right now. So it's very exciting to see products that really impact, patients' lives.
People, absolutely.
So that's really amazing. I've also spent in my career, working in energy. So I had the opportunity to spend some time at Los Alamos National Lab, and I was working on plasma fusion.
Yeah, I saw that when I was doing a little bit of LinkedIn stalking on your background, and I was like, that's not something everybody can say. I worked, in plasma at a lab, so I'd love to hear more about that experience.
So I'll tell you a little bit more of that, but I'm also interested in the energy companies out of mHub and solving some of this. Because I think some of the biggest challenges we have is, cost of energy, and you can really increase efficiency and economic impact, and even computing when you get into AI. Those are so energy intensive processes that if we could lower the cost of energy and not depend, on finite resources, you can really improve the quality of people's lives. And so there's a couple of companies, in our portfolio and here at mHub that are focusing, in carbon capture or clean energy generation, battery storage. Bedrock Materials, recently moved here, and they're working on a sodium ion battery. So it's a lower cost battery technology, and to help kind of reduce the price of lithium ion technology. And then there's also some more tangible technologies that are being developed that are more consumer related. So Ganance has a product that it's basically a smartwatch, but for any watch. So they put this little thin device underneath any watch you want to wear.
Oh, wow.
And it tracks your fitness and it uses acceleration data and can generate stats on
in your own unique style.
Yeah,
that's
right.
awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. If people aren't into the Apple Watch style or something like that, they can now apply it to
any watch they want to wear.
Any of their favorite watches, or maybe their grandpa's watch or something that they want to keep using. That's really cool. Thank you for helping us understand a little bit more in detail about what kind of members you're serving and projects you're helping kind of get off the ground and really scale and get them able to be testing with their customers and actually getting beyond the early stages of maybe the models or the concept stage. And so I know that you manage a lot of the kind of innovation programs, and also part of that is the MedTech incubator, if I'm not mistaken. And could you tell us more about kind of your investment in this space and a little bit more about the funding model as far as mHub does some investment? I think you guys also work with helping founders find other investors as well, and kind of how that all balances out, and what people might want to keep in mind if they're interested in applying to a program like this, what you all are looking for.
So, and maybe I'll back up a little bit. I think one of the biggest barriers, as we've noticed that entrepreneurs are struggling in, is access to capital, right? And we think with mHub, we've solved a lot of the other barriers, like access to talent, access to equipment, manufacturing network, education, mentorship. And one of the barriers that we waited a little bit on was access to capital. And we wanted to make sure that we had a robust ecosystem before we raised a fund. So we raised a $15 million fund that supported 6 cohorts.
Incredible.
And we have 3 themes in those cohorts: med devices, climate and energy, and smart sustainable manufacturing. And there were 2 cohorts in each theme, each of those themes.
In each cohort, is there a set number of people?
So there's about 8 to 10 startups in each cohort. And they go through a very rigorous 6-month program. It's longer than most accelerator programs. And we pair them up with a corporate partner who issues challenge statements for us to recruit those startups. And that's another key piece, because they can pilot with that corporate partner, and they're a customer. They understand the market a little bit more. They understand what needs are out there, and that's a little bit different and an advantage in this.
Definitely. Does the corporate partner get to keep any IP or anything like that?
No. So the IP is always owned by the startup.
Wow.
So.
That's an amazing opportunity. If they're literally saying, we need this, we need help with this thing or something like that, but we want someone else to come up with their own solution and be able to scale that and then work with us in the future.
I mean, they're just hoping for the solution and to understand, what entrepreneurs are bringing to this market, understand how they're solving these problems.
And I mean, it makes sense, because I think also sometimes there's certain things, obviously there's some things in a big company that's not worth them to be working on or prototyping. It might be a smaller part of the bigger product or system they're working on, and so it's not worth it, and they recognize that there's this small lean team that can probably make this happen much faster and be moving quicker. And so totally understand. But it's amazing that you guys kind of made this connection happen, and you're making the platform for this opportunity to take place.
So we take those statements from those corporate partners, and and they made for the med tech, it might be like connected therapeutic devices, or at-home monitoring, or drug delivery solutions, or surgical tools or hand pieces, or any new breakthrough med device. Right? We publish those challenge statements, and then we recruit startups, and we get hundreds of applications. So it's a very competitive program. We give those companies about $200K in capital and in-kind services. So they get cash and budgets for product development. And then they spend 6 months, here at mHub, and we go through customer discovery, product feasibility, market access. With med devices, it's challenging with the regulatory hurdles they have to go through, and FDA, and reimbursement strategy and all that. And then we focus on their business viability as a module, and then telling their story, and then they pitch in front of about 500 investors that come to demo day. And the goal is to really accelerate their product development and increase the odds of commercialization.
Right. And so, all of that is over 6 months, you said, right?
It is, yeah. But they still have access to mHub for another 18 months. So they get 2 years of access.
That's so awesome.
So it's a great program. There's about 60 or so mentors that come in. That each startup gets assigned a mentor one-on-one. But then there's a bench of subject matter experts in regulatory, or in reimbursement, or sales, or product development, or manufacturing. And we can put them in touch with the right mentor at the right time. So it's a really well thought out program, and we'll be opening up applications very shortly for our next MedTech program.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, Bill will tell us about his work around plasma fusion at Los Alamos, and how access to tools became a driving force at mHub. Welcome back to The Bomb, Engineering a Path Forward. When we left off, Bill walked us through what a startup might expect to experience once they're accepted into mHub, and how an innovator listening to this podcast could join the space. Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we'll definitely have to include more information on that in the show notes so people can learn more.
Right.
I'm sure a bunch of people, like you said, it's competitive, so I'm sure others have already been planning to submit for a long time, but we can put it out there just in case anyone's ready with an idea, and they can know for the future as well.
Yep.
That sounds like an incredible opportunity, an extensive kind of support system you guys really provide from all angles. And so I'm going to rewind a little bit, and I want to get more into your background and experience with engineering, and we did promise that we'd circle back to the plasma lab.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that and how, I know that you were saying that, and I can totally relate to this, saying you were kind of missing this access to tools and to the network and this sort of thing when you left the different consulting roles.
I loved working at Los Alamos National Lab, So what I was working on there is they have a lab called the P24 lab, and they were doing the reverse field configuration plasma fusion. And basically they would create this plasma, and reverse field configuration is basically, if you've seen like a smoke ring, basically they set up a plasma in like a toroidal shape where you have like this, it looks like a smoke ring, and then you pinch the plasma so fast that it fuses together.
Wow. And
the way they set this up is create the plasma, and they would inject it into an aluminum cylinder, or at least this was like, we were just trying to create the plasma that would last long enough to then inject into this cylinder. But then they would send 11 trillion amps through the walls of the cylinder and crush it. And then you would get fusion. And my role there was like really understanding the plasma, and if it can sustain, can you create a plasma that can last long enough in this configuration to then inject into.
And where you were coming into this, you had no experience with this, right?
No. So no, it's just mechanical engineering, no physics background. I loved physics.
Yeah. Well, I can see the way your face is, I don't know, if people are just listening, not watching the video of this, your face is like totally lighting up when you're explaining this. It's awesome. Yeah. So clearly you were in the right place.
Yeah. And so, and when you're at Los Alamos, you have access to all these amazing tools. Like there was a room that was just filled with capacitor banks, and like one capacitor was as large as the room that we're in now, and it would deliver so much current. So you had to, like, some of the engineering challenges is they would have these plates of aluminum that were an inch or two thick, and that were like this wide, that would direct current into like such a small channel. And so we were in this like room. You had to be in this like Faraday cage, and all the equipment's in this cage, because when you release that much energy, it creates so much electromagnetic interference that all your equipment would just basically get destroyed. And so when they would do these experiments, we were like hunkered down in this bunker, like it was really tight, and then they would send all the current in, and then we'd see what happened. And my role was like building these little, what they call a B-dot probe, which is just a coil of wire, and you can measure magnetic fields. And we would move that probe within this vacuum chamber, and we would measure like the magnetic fields, and then try to determine what type of plasma we had in that chamber.
Wow, that sounds like an incredible opportunity.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
And it doesn't sound like you ended up doing too much in physics after that, maybe. Correct me if I'm wrong. You didn't quite get back there, but it's so cool that you're able to say you did it and be involved in such an epic project. So
to me, I think it's a very research-oriented project, and like, fusion is always 30 years out. Although I think we're finally now getting closer. But it's an on-running joke that fusion is always 30 years away. But I think it is the most promising. If you look at all the energy sources, most of it comes from our sun. Some of it comes from like the Earth, kinetic energy of the Earth collapsing and forming. And like the Earth is warm mostly because of that kinetic energy when it formed. But other than thermal energy from the Earth, like all the energy is coming from the sun. So like photosynthesis, all the oil that has been created on the Earth, that all came from the energy from the sun, which is fusion. And so the most efficient source of energy, in my mind, is fusion. And I think it's, all you really need is just hydrogen. And that's the most abundant element in the universe. And you get helium, out of fusing two hydrogen atoms together. And so it's like very abundant. It could be very cheap if we figure out how to actually.
If only we just.
Yeah, if only we knew how to do it.
Just a little part, but we got it. We're close. No, for sure. I've been hearing a lot of definitely interesting conversations going on in that space. So, like you said, I think we are getting closer and closer. But I'm hearing you talk about working on these projects, and I imagine, I wonder, sometimes do you miss kind of some of this hands-on engineering side of things, or do you get to do enough of that in your role here, or do you find time to do that outside of all the managing of the programs that you're doing?
No, I think that's like the most rewarding part is I see so many companies here and I get to understand what technical challenges they have and they're facing. And that's primarily my focus, is really understanding, how I can advance their TRL levels, their technology readiness levels, and figure out what challenges they're having and point them to the right resources here at mHub to solve those challenges. And we also do this for external clients, that aren't in Chicago, that want access to, R&D or product development efforts. We can build a team, of our members here and execute a specific scope of work. And that also funds some of the entrepreneurs here if they can provide engineering services to others. So they can, do part-time engineering contracting and then jump back to their startup.
Yeah, that's great to be able to switch between those and still have it all in one place.
But I think I can scratch that engineering itch just by mentoring the startups here, and building scopes of work with external clients. So there's enough of that.
Enough to keep your wheels turning.
Yeah. For sure.
Good. And so I want to be conscientious of our time here. We're almost, want to wrap up shortly. So what's something outside of technology that's inspiring you these days?
Yeah. Well, I have 2 children that are under the ages of 3.
Oh my gosh, precious.
So I know. So it was Will and Henry.
Like the best time.
Yeah. And it's really inspiring to see them grow, and just see them absorb information and learn, and just like when they figure something out, like there's so much joy in that moment. And so sharing those like moments and with them and teaching them, I think is really inspiring.
No, that's so fun. And do you find yourself making them custom toys and things, or I don't even know if you have the time, but but you have this history of making toys,
so, right?
And you have the tools.
I do. Yeah, and so
just hacking their toys.
I brought them to mHub quite a bit, and they love coming here. I think Will loves the elevator out of all the things.
Nice. It's always like the cardboard box, or the remote. It's not even, you're like, there's a 3D printer, there's like a robotic arm, and it's the elevator.
So my job with their toys is mainly fixing them, replacing batteries, like everything breaks, and I'm like hot melt gluing things back together. So I think there will be a point where like, when they get old enough, they'll appreciate some of the effort that goes into building custom toys.
Totally.
And, I think that would be a fun thing to do together with them, is like create their own toy or their own, electric vehicle or big wheel or,
Definitely.
Wheel.
That's awesome. And last but not least, we ask all of our guests, what's on your personal bill of materials?
Yeah, so I don't know. I would say like what am I made of? I think it's really passion, creativity, ingenuity, a bit of humility and kindness, and curiosity. Like really trying to understand how things work. I think those are the pieces that really make me tick. I think I'm fueled by Red Bull. I was telling
Powered by Red Bull.
Yeah, powered by Red Bull.
Jacob said coffee, so there's always something like that in there.
Yeah, there's a little caffeine that keeps you going, and so that's what makes me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing. It was really awesome to get to know you finally. I forgot to mention at the beginning that how we kind of first came to meet each other, but back in 2018, I toured the original space, and I realized we also forgot to talk about the move here. But we have to do a part 2 maybe, or when we hopefully come back and do a shop tour.
Yeah, I'll give you a tour.
We can talk more about that. But so it's awesome to finally get to know you better after all these years of kind of hearing the epic stories about mHub and what you all are up to, and really interesting to learn how you kind of bring all these different worlds together to make such a supportive, amazing ecosystem for your members and for your partners and everyone you work with. So thank you so much for taking the time today to speak with us.
Yeah, thank you.
That was Bill Fienup, co-founder of mHub, sharing what he has done to set the space apart from other incubators in the US and better support the projects advancing the world. I'm your host, Magenta Strongheart, and this has been The Bomb, Engineering a Path Forward. If you like The Bomb, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share the show wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow Supplyframe and Hackaday on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Design Lab at Supplyframe Design Lab on Instagram and Twitter. The Bomb is a Supplyframe podcast produced by me, Magenta Strongheart, and Ryan Tillotson, written by Maggie Bowles and edited by Daniel Ferreira. Theme music is by Anna Hogbin, show art by Thomas Schneider, special thanks to Giovanni Salinas, Bruce Dominguez, Thomas Woodward, Jin Kumar, Jordan Clark, the entire Supplyframe team, and you, our wonderful listeners. I'm your host, Magenta Strongheart. See you next week.